Today, a milestone in the modernization of the United States Army is the new 101st Airborne Division. All-purpose units which can fly at a moment's notice to trouble spots anywhere in the world.
I've told my kids most of the stories. I think that everybody should get an idea what the hell a war is all about so they avoid it. I hope the hell nobody ever has to go through that again, but the way things are going, you don't know. I got a very good memory. I can remember a lot of things that I'm really happy to remember, and I got a lot of things I wish I could forget, but I can't. You got to put it behind you and just live your life. We knew a war was coming. And my dad had always talked up the Army. He was a corporal in the 37th Division, 145th Infantry in World War I. So I wanted to be part of it.
You know, that age, 17, 18, 19, sort of looking forward, maybe we're going to get in the war. You want something to happen.
We would listen on the radio to Hitler rambling along. It got to the point that I understood that if France and Britain didn't have some help, they were going down the tube. And people said, no, we're not going to go over and help them. That's welfare. And I said, no, it isn't welfare. We're not going over to bail them out. We're going over to join with them, get rid of this guy.
We went to a show, and they had a newsreel showing experimenting with parachute troops. Showed the French doing it and the Russians doing it, and then they showed the Americans. And my girl said, man, they must be so brave. And I said, yeah, they gotta be so stupid, because I was afraid of heights. But the idea stuck with me, and I got to thinking, if they can do it, there ain't no reason I can't do it. I was up on the roof of our house in a snowstorm, putting woods, across the rafters. My mother was living in the house, so she opened the window and turned the radio on. That's when Roosevelt was saying where the Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor and the state of war existed. My dad says, them sons of bitches. So I waited to my 18th birthday and I signed up.
You see guys that were just a little bit older than you being drafted, and so you knew it was coming, but I also knew I'd never be drafted. I knew I was going to enlist. It's sort of funny, I went down and enlisted and left that same day.
The 101st Airborne was formed on the 16th of August, 1942. They took the 82nd Infantry Division and split it in two, made two airborne divisions.
You wanted to do something different, and the paratroopers were different. It was a new branch of service. And so when you went through the processing, they asked you, preference of branch? I want to be a paratrooper. You had to volunteer. They didn't draft you and say you're in the paratroopers. The $50 extra a month didn't affect me at all. I didn't even think about that.
When I went through jump school, you had a choice. You could go to the 101st or the 82nd. And I liked the looks of the Eagle better than I did the AA, so I went to the 101st. And an eagle always screams as it attacks. We were the screaming eagles.
And Colonel Sink was a graduate of West Point, put him in charge, and he came up with what he said was a parachute basic. So from the middle of July until 1st of December, we went through this parachute basic. And we went from 6,500 people to 1,650 people.
So that made us awful cocky, you know. We figured, we can do it and you can't, see.
We had hard training, 5 miles, 6 miles, 10 miles. The 506 was the first one to do it. They had to march 50 miles. So the 501, we had to do the same thing.
All our training was for one thing, and that was to lead the invasion. We didn't know where or when, but for 2 years, that's what we trained for.
I'd never been in an airplane before. And so the first airplane I got in, I had to jump out of it.
Colonel Sink had us out on a hillside and he said, "You guys are unhappy." And he said, "Yeah." "You don't like the food?" "No." "And you think I'm too hard on you?" "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets any better." And he just turned and walked away, and that was the end of it.
One day in England, we made a bad jump. Instead of landing out in a big field, we wind blew us into this little town. One guy went through the window of a house. I hit a barbed wire fence, busted off 2 posts, and got all scratched up. And somebody says, "You know, we're going to pay for this when we get older." The sergeant says, "What makes you think you're going to get older?" You know, and that kind of put a damper on things for a few minutes, but everybody figured, well, you guys might die, but not me.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you.
It was still daylight on the night of June 5th when we took off. Then we're flying out, we were right over the invasion fleet, and it looked like the whole channel was moving. I didn't think there was that many ships in the world. And I was standing at the door 600 feet above them, and the moonlight shining on the waters, and that was the most magnificent sight I think I've ever seen.
We didn't go in over the beaches. We went around and came in parallel to the beaches.
When we crossed the coast, we run into a fog bank, and all the pilots panicked. They separated, didn't want to run into each other.
These pilots were fresh pilots. They'd never been in combat before, and they're about the same age as many of us.
There's streams of tracer bullets coming up, and anti-aircraft fire busting all around. You could hear it hitting the plane.
So they became like fighter pilots. They hit the deck. I mean, they went down and they began to maneuver and swoosh back and forth. You had to hang on the anchor line to keep your balance.
Yeah, that process, when a red light comes on, you get up and there's a cable runs above your head and you got a static line 20 foot long and you got a snap fastener and you snap that on. The first guy, the guy behind him, checks his equipment and then said, "Okay." And then he turns around, that guy checks him, and then it goes down the line, then the last guy does it, and then he turns around, they do it to him. So you all are checked.
My platoon leader, I still remember, he said, "Klein, I want you to jump last and make sure everybody gets out." And I vowed after the whole thing was over, never again will I jump last. Too many times their plane got hit. But if you were near the door, you got out. But if you were back a ways, you went down with the plane.
Had an engine on fire and we went out through fire. And the co-pilot came back and said, "You want to jump now?" And we said, "How long is it going to be before we get to where we jump?" And he said, "Well, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And somebody said, "You think you can hold it that long?" And he said, "We can as long as the wing stays on."
And so you're supposed to yell, "Billy Lee." Well, hell, nobody even thought about Billy Lee or Geronimo or anything else. No, the only thing I thought of, "France, here I come."
I was jumping to third position, see? He was going too low and too fast. And he turned the green light on. The lieutenant went out and the sergeant went out, and I'm just reaching for a switch to turn the bundles loose under the plane loose. And just as I was reaching for it, he rolled the plane sideways. That threw me out the door head first. My shins hit the bottom of the door, and I somersaulted. And the first thing you do, you look up to check to shoot. So I looked up, and there was a ground. And I looked down, and there was a chute. Now, I'd never been to France before, but it didn't look right to me. The second I saw what it was, I bent over. I was going to try and crawl up my leg, and just as I bent over, I slammed into the ground, and the lights went out. And I don't know if I laid there for 10 seconds or 10 minutes or an hour. I have no idea. But all of a sudden, I became aware of the fact that I'm laying in knee-deep wet grass, and everything hurt. Even my hair hurt. And I didn't know which way to go. See, I knew we weren't where we were supposed to be. And it's overcast, so I couldn't see the stars or judge your distance.
It was still pretty dark and you couldn't really see very far, so we really didn't know where we were. And somebody crawled up a pole and read what it was. And once he did that, then we were oriented. We knew where we were. And then the guys started drifting off to where they're supposed to go.
When you land, you're supposed to go the way your plane came, which makes sense because the guys jumped ahead of you, but it doesn't always work that way.
Then I heard somebody walking through the grass fast. And in my imagination, I figured it was an 8-foot tall German with a machine gun or something, see? So I squatted down there trying to silhouette him against the sky. Well, I couldn't because there's a hedgerow behind him, it was too high. But I could see a movement, And all of a sudden he stopped. So I pulled out my clicker and I clicked it. And that German said, "Moo!" The whole stampede of cows went off through there. It sounded like 100 of them sound like, but I don't know how many were.
Here was a dirt road. It was a road I think the farmers probably used to get to their fields with their carts. So I went, 15, 20, 25 minutes, I don't know how long. And I saw a silhouette, a helmet. And we had the password, flash, thunder. So I said, flash. And the only report I got was, it's me. It was a kid I knew, my platoon. So finally it began to get daylight. And I was pretty cautious about walking down the road in the daylight. So I made a decision, we'll get off the road and dig in and just wait.
It gets light about 4:30 that time of the year over there. I come to the end of a hedgerow. There's a branch hanging down in front, so instead of walking around it, I picked it up like this to walk under it. When I picked it up, there was a burst of machine gun fire that went through that bush. And I dropped down on the ground. I thought it was one of our guys, and I figured, dummy. I pulled out the clicker and I clicked it. That brought another burst, so I sneaked back along the hedge. I knew about where he was, and I got back there and took a grenade. I pulled the pin, let the handle fly off, and it goes 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and I tossed it up over the hedgerow. And when it went off, I run up on top and emptied that carbine. But he was in bad shape. He was dead. But his gun's laying there. And I picked it up, and I didn't know where the controls were, but I figured he'd been shooting it, so it must be ready. And I start moving off, and I caught a movement in the brush over there, and I pulled up and was going to shoot, and they said, I don't know, and I go click, click. And I hear click, 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 click. Here's my buddy Grininger. And this is 4 hours since we jumped, and neither one of us had seen anybody since. And we almost kissed each other, And I was scared, there ain't no question about it. Anybody that says he wasn't, either wasn't there or a damn liar, one of the two.
You're scared a lot all the time, but you can't let that fear rule you. You suppress that. It's there in the back of your mind. Even though we know what the casualties would be, each of us had a feeling we never expressed to anybody that we were going to be the exception, we weren't going to be killed.
As it lightened up, we'd move faster. We thought we was going quiet, but evidently we weren't because somebody hollered out, flash. We said, thunder. He said, welcome. Went over, there was a lieutenant and two guys from the 82nd Airborne. And I said, Lieutenant, where in the hell are we? And he says, after looking at my maps and studying the country around here, he says, I'm not sure, but I think we're someplace in Europe. There was a house on the other side of a hedgerow there, and he said, go through that gate and see what's there. So I went through the gate, and I see somebody laying up on one arm, and he says, was ist los? Well, I pulled around with a rifle and he pulled up with his, and then we both pulled the trigger. His went bang, mine went click. And I knew I was hit, but I didn't know where. You know, and the first thing I did, I dropped the rifle, I grabbed a grenade, and I slammed it at him, and I turned around to get away from the blast. You know, and I dropped down, the thing went off, and I looked up and I'm looking right down the barrel of the M1 rifle. The guy says, "That you, Mac?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Are you hit?" And I said, "Yeah." But the bullet went through my arm, cut a groove across here, and went out underneath. They gave me 4 prisoners and told me to walk them back to the beach and report to the medic. And I walked up to the surgeon, had a tent there with a red cross on it, on the beach. And I said, "I'm supposed to report to you." He says, "You've been wounded?" I said, "Yeah, but it's just a little." He said, "Get on the boat." I said, "Yeah, but it's just a little." He said, "Get on the goddamn boat." Well, you don't argue with a colonel, so I got on the damn boat. About that time, they brought my lieutenant in. He's laying on his belly in a stretcher. I can see his pants are all bloody, you know. I said, "Where are you hit, Lieutenant?" He said, "You know goddamn well where I'm hit." See, a bullet went right through both cheeks of his ass, you know. We call him the only man in Europe with 5 assholes.
Our main objective then was to capture Carentan because it was a fairly decent sized city. But we then formed a line with the 82nd Airborne to keep the Germans from getting to the beaches. They always say there's never an atheist in a foxhole. I believe that. I was in a little orchard, and for some reason the Germans laid a fire on that orchard. There was already a slit trench in there, so I jumped in the slit trench, and that was when I gained religion. I prayed my heart out to help me.
We were in this defilade where the cattle went through, banks on each side, and German artillery and American artillery both were shooting at us, and the place was littered with bodies. Oh, hell, it was awful. And we were sitting there up against the bank, and a mortar shell came down and went into one of the guys and cut the bottom part of his heart off, and he just turned white. I remember looking at that and thinking about it, you know, that could have been me too.
Preparations in England for the airborne operations of 17th September. The 1st Allied Airborne Army is ready to take off from scores of fields to invade the Rhine Delta of the Netherlands. The forces participating in the largest assault of its kind are the U.S. 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, veterans of the D-Day landings in Normandy. The paratroopers are loaded into hundreds of C-47 transports.
It was a daylight jump. The planes flew in perfect formation. They didn't split up like they did in Normandy. I jumped number 1, by the way, and because finally were issued big radios. You just dropped them on your back. So if you jumped the radio, they had to put you first because you had this big radio attached to your leg. So we got into the little town, and it had a church, and it had a windmill, one of the few windmills that I saw in Holland. And my lieutenant said that we'll make that our OP.
It wasn't like Normandy. We weren't bragging about what we're going to do going in either, because we'd already been there and we knew what was going on down. It's a little different when you've been there.
We were on an outpost up in there, and this slimy colonel comes up and says, "I say, I want you chaps to take a patrol and find out what Jerry's doing up in here." And we said, "Yeah, we can do that tonight." He said, "Oh, I'm on a daylight patrol." So I was carrying a 42-pound machine gun, a box of ammunition. And there's 7 of us. We had a medic with us. And we snuck around. We got 3 miles behind the German lines. We were going along a dike because it's all swamp down below, you know. And the Germans evidently spotted us because I heard this shell coming. And I knew it was going to be close. So I ducked down like this and I started running. See? And I did. The shell hit behind me. It vaporized the guy behind me. And between my running and the boost I got from that blast, it blew me off this dike and went down into the swamp, and this 42-pound machine gun comes spinning down landed the barrel first right on this ankle, right there. It crushed all the bones in that ankle. The medic we had with us took a tube of Novocaine and shot it right through the boot in there. And I had to walk about 6 miles to get out of there. And every step I could feel the bones grating back and forth, you know. Anyway, I've had pain in that constantly, day and night, for 75 years. And it's just as much now as it has been the rest of the time.
My best friend, Jake Wingard, he married just before we went overseas. What a honeymoon, about a week. He was a sergeant in charge of 2 mortars. I was his radio man. So we went into the windmill, and our infantry guys from G Company, H Company, I Company came up, and they formed a line opposing the German line. So he gave a fire order to me, and I called back to the mortars. Well, he had to stand in that window to see, and I knew he must have known that they could see him, because he was like a sore thumb sticking out, standing in this window. And so he gave a fire order, and now you fire, and you can hear the mortars go off, so you can wait a few seconds, and then you have to look and see where they're hitting. And he had to step in that window again to see where the mortars landed, and then make an adjustment. And next thing I knew, he turned to me, he said, "I'm dead, I'm dead." And I caught him, and I laid him down. I'm yelling, "Medic, medic," and no medic around. So I went back, and the lieutenant said, "He's gone."
Well, something hit me, and I don't know what it was. Every shell that hits the ground explodes in pieces, and they fly around there hot. So when it hits you, it's not just the injury, it's the heat.
Whenever there's fighting going on, somebody's going to get it. You anticipate this. It's going to happen, and you're going to have to go on.
Here's a road 60 miles long. The whole 60 miles going through enemy territory. And we're going to, with not enough people really. And those people across the river, 10,000 British people and Polish people, were supposed to get relieved within 2 or 3 days, and that didn't happen. And of course we heard that it was a failure. Tell that to 1/3 of the people of Holland who were liberated a year before the rest of Holland was. Tell them it was a failure and see what they tell you.
This was the Battle of the Bulge. The entire world awaited the fateful outcome as the armies of Nazi Germany lashed out in the counteroffensive in the Ardennes, on which Germany gambled everything.
We were pulled out of Holland, I say, around Thanksgiving.
They'd have us all lined up for a mission, like we were supposed to land at Rambouillet, France, and take the airport. Well, by the time we got down the planes, you ready to go, they canceled it because Patton had just went through there, you know? And they had 3 or 4 different things like that.
We went to Reims, France. Took us by truck down there. And we were put in a camp at Napoleon, one of his camps. The barracks were quite nice.
We turned in all of our machine guns and mortars and things like that. Most of our rifles were turned in to be redone. We turned in all of our extra clothing. We were going to go to the States and have a furlough, and then go to Guam to get ready to go to Japan.
And they handed out passes to Paris. And I thought, no rush, I'll wait to go to Paris. Besides, it's December, it's cold. The armies don't fight during bad weather, you know, they like good roads and so on. Well, Hitler hoodwinked the Allies on that one.
See, they took the cast off my leg the 10th of December. The 16th of December, the Germans broke through. The 18th, they woke us up at 2 o'clock in the morning, flipped the lights on, and everybody fall out.
Sergeant came in, asked, "What the hell's going on?" He said, "There's been a breakthrough and you guys are going." I said, "Oh, hell." we're not going any place. Hell, we don't have any weapons, we don't have any ammunition, no K rations. He said, you're going.
So they put us on cattle trucks and they take off going.
No airplanes, went by truck because they had to get us up there in a hurry.
And they loaded us in them standing up. We could hardly move. We started out with lights on, and then I knew this was for real.
And everybody else is coming this way and we're going that way. And the rumor started, these guys are coming up to the front and we're going back to the States to sell war bonds, see? We didn't know it, but these guys are all retreating and we're going up.
So we got up there on the 19th. I drove all night with the lights on the trucks because they didn't worry about the German Air Force.
We stopped and everybody get out and they're throwing snowballs at each other and everything else, you know. And the officers had to go to the head of the column. And they come back and they says, well, they got the dope. The Germans broke through and we got a hold of this place. Somebody says, what is this place? And he said, I don't know, someplace in Belgium, you know. So it was in Bastogne.
There's 7 roads and 3 railroads in that town. And this area is swampy and hilly, and they have to have roads before they can do it. If you hold that town, we can stop them. And that's why that was so damned important.
And we held it all right.
We stopped on the outskirts of Bastogne, and it's the first time I'd ever seen American troops. They were retreating.
And some of them were just out of their mind. And it's all these guys coming back toward us, and where the hell did you guys come from? Oh, they're killing everybody up there. So what are you going to do? He said, we're going up to fight. He said, they'll kill you. They're killing everybody.
So we went right through Bastogne, out this little called Mont, and put our battalion, our regiment, formed a line there.
If they couldn't get Bastogne, they couldn't win this war. Didn't matter what it was or how many people were involved. We were told, you're going in and you're never going to fail.
And the Germans then made their attack. So during that attack, I got hit pretty good. There was an explosion, and to this day, I don't know what it was. My first thought was, I hope it's bad enough to get me home. My buddy from Columbus, Herb Oakley, he came over and he looked at the wound. He said, I hate to tell you this, Dick, but it's not good enough to get you home. And I felt like punching him. But when they got me to the hospital, it was, the nerves had been cut. That's why I wore this brace. I've never been able to move my toes since then.
And of course, we weren't fighting in a city, we were fighting outside. But our headquarters and our facilities and our medics and everything were in that area.
The Germans had us surrounded there, and they sent a surrender message in. Surrender or we're going to annihilate the town and the civilians in it, and plus your troops. And our General McAuliffe sent one word back, nuts. And the German envoy said, well, what's nuts mean? He says, it means go to hell.
You know, there's no heroes. I don't give a damn what you say. There's no heroes. When we got out of Bastogne, nobody had had their clothes off in a month. You could smell us 2 blocks away, and crummy looking. Their helmets were all black from trying to cook in them, and all the paint burned off them, you know. And there's nothing glamorous about it whatsoever. You're scared all the time and hungry. Can't tell what it's like to go for 4 or 5 days without any sleep at all and laying in mud, you know, and somebody trying to kill you every 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know. And you could die at any time. It feels like a little bit of you goes every time one of these guys goes, you know. The funny thing, you get back and you look at the empty bunk. you know, when you go back to England. Yeah, kind of gets to you. When Günninger died, that got to me more than anything else in the whole war. In my mind, I figured that if anybody deserved to live, it was Günninger, because he had a wife and a little baby he'd never seen. He'd get a letter and a picture every time we had mail, and he always was volunteering to go on patrol because he could speak German like a native. You see, he had a premonition. We were attacked in this little town. We'd bedded down for the night, and the temperature was way down below zero, you know. I was kind of heat up a K ration to eat, you know, and I looked over at him, and he's tearing up his sleeping bags. And during the night, his feet had swelled up so much he couldn't get his boots back on. So he was tearing up his sleeping bag and wrapping around his feet. I said, Christ, Johnny, you're going to need that tonight. He said, no, I won't. I said, why, I will still be up here. He said, yeah, but I won't need it. I won't need anything. I'm going to die today. I said, oh, bullshit. Yeah, you never talked like this before. He said, no, Mac, I'm not fooling you. I'm going to die today. And calm, like he says, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, you know. So he took 3 men, and I had 3. And we was moving up. And we had a deal between us. I'd move for 20 minutes, then he'd pass me in 20 minutes, then I'd pass him. That even the chances up with somebody running into trouble. Okay? Well, about the 3rd trade, why, I had pulled mine over. He went past, you know, and he walked over the hill. And he was following him, and I heard a machine gun open up from far off. It didn't even associate it with us. And I got over the hill, and I looked, and there's somebody laying in the snow, all backwards like this. Went down there, it was Günninger, deader than hell. And when that happened, I flipped. I went completely bonkers. I threw the damn gun down, and I started running at that machine gun. And one of these rookies tackled me and sit on me, you know. And from that time on, I didn't have any fear at all. I just figured, I'm going to die in this goddamn war. Let it happen right now and get it over with, you know, just to get me out of this misery.
Every time you go in combat, you lose a few of the old people. The first time you come in, you lose a lot of them. And then you smarten up a little bit. We didn't lose our nerve. We just didn't want to be the last people killed. Just somebody came out in the street and said it's all over. And that's how we knew it. There was no official proclamation or anything.
Well, we went overseas. We left New York Harbor September 4th, 1943. There was 119 men in the company. Out of that 119, when the war ended, there was 9.
You can't understand how it is to put down all that uncertainty, just great relief.
4 of us decided to go home because we had enough points to do it. And the other 5 wanted to stay and tour Europe and see what it looked like with nobody shooting at them.
The first time I could say, I made it. No worry about submarines or anything else. We're now in the harbor in New York. Beautiful thing. That's one of the impressions I had. First time I'd ever seen the Statue of Liberty.
And when I first come home, you know, everybody during the war thought all American soldiers had a halo over their head, and all the Germans had horns and the Japs had pointed tails, you know, and our purpose was to liberate Europe. We had no animosity toward anybody. Wasn't mad at nobody. We was just doing our job. They were doing theirs.
A German parachute officer got shot through the head. And I took his camera, and I got back to England, and I had that film developed that shows 3 little boys sitting on a log, and an older man looked like could have been the grandfather. So you see there's tragedy on both sides.
To hate a person, I hate a nation. I just can't cope with it.
Wars end. You're going to have to live in this world with people. It's not going to be a country isolated anymore. We're going to have to deal in a world where everybody was with everybody.
You're hired to do a job. You do your job, you get paid for it, that's it. The way we looked at our country's calling, you answer it. You know, you're doing this for your country.
We volunteered for it, we got trained for it, we got paid for it.
I did my duty. I've never considered myself a hero. The ones that get killed are the heroes. But there's a lot of guys that did things like never got a medal. They did it, no one even was aware of it.
The idea of somebody saying, oh, they gave their life. Nobody give their life. You know, I've seen a lot of men die, but I never saw anybody give their life. You gave your service to your country. You didn't give your life, somebody takes it.
The way we work, we're not looking for glory. We're looking for results.
For about the first week after I was home, I couldn't go to sleep unless I had my .45 in my hand, because I'd been used to sleeping that way. You know, I didn't want to talk about it too much, except to my family. You know, my dad and, you know.
All I wanted to do was get married, find a piece of land and build a house.
It never bothered me to talk about it. I know a lot of people that they say, oh, my dad wouldn't talk about the war.
You don't lose your humanity. All you do is put it on hold for a while. You go to war because it's necessary. I am extremely proud to have served in the 101st because we were, as they call it, the tip of the spear and all of that, because of what we did and the way we did it. And that's not bragging at all, it's just what happened.
I think it's the best division in the whole armed forces. Every mission they ever had, they made a success out of it. D-Day, Operation Market Garden, and the Bulge. They were all successes as far as I'm concerned.
We were the first division in the history of the United States Army to get the presidential citation as a whole division for Bastogne.
Sure it was worth it, damn right it was worth it. And I'd do it under the same conditions again.
I think Jake would think it was worth it if he could see what the appreciation the Dutch have, if he could see how they take care of that graveyard.
When I see these people healthy, happy, and everything, it makes me feel good to think that I might have had a small part in helping them be like that. Because you could tell the difference the way the people looked when we jumped in there. They looked all downtrodden, you know, and afraid to look you in the eye and everything. Now you go over there and they're, hey, how you doing, buddy, you know. And
as long as you're physically fit and mentally fit, do what you can do.
Take advantage of good health, do what you can to make it better.
I'm in my 100th year, and I may or may not jump again. I've told people I'm not going to, but there are a lot of optimists. They've got a jump set up for me when I'm 101, another 105, and we'll see what happens if I'm still here.
We were required to sing this song when you're going through jump school because they're trying to make us quit. And to sing this song, it's something that could possibly happen. See? Is everybody happy? Cried the sergeant looking up. Our hero Feeper answered yes, and then they stood him up. He jumped right out into the blasters, set Dick Klein unhooked, and he ain't gonna jump no more. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die, and he ain't gonna jump no more.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
He counted long, he counted loud, he waited for the shock. He felt the wind, he felt the clouds, he felt the awful drop. He jerked his cord, the silk spilled out and wrapped around his legs. He ain't gonna jump no more. projectors cracked his dome. The lines were snarled and tied in knots around his skinny bones. The canopy became his shroud. He hurtled to the ground.